Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, A Mathematical Map to Success, How to Incorporate Personal and Professional Skills into Math Instruction. Our presenter today is Alex Beene. Alex is an award-winning author and educator. He has been featured on ABC, CBS, ESPN Radio, and an array of print publications for his children's books, which are available in over 70 countries. His business knowledge has been presented in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, USA Today, Reader's Digest, the Washington Post, and on CNBC, and he was honored by the NASDAQ for his philanthropy work. He was a recipient of the Jefferson Award for Public Service and served on Google's Digital Literacy Board, which promotes free learning resources for students worldwide. During the global pandemic, he was recognized by Good Housekeeping magazine as a hero educator for his work with distance learning. And it is our pleasure to have him on with us today, presenting on this topic. If you want to let us know where you're calling in from today, you can do that in the chat box. I see a bunch of people are already doing that. That's great. And if you have questions during his presentation, feel free to put those into the Q&A box, and he will get to those at some point during or after his presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alex. Thanks so much.
Thank you, James. Welcome, everybody. I really enjoyed, while it was playing, that snazzy video. That was just so wonderful. It got me jazzed up for COABE in a few months, and I hope that I see a lot of you there. I was seeing everybody as they were putting their names in and where they're from. Saw a lot of my folks from Tennessee. Thank you for coming. I said to them last week, I was on some calls, I said, please, if you're in Tennessee, please come. I don't know who else is going to come to this session. And so I'm excited to see them, but I'm also really excited to see everybody here represented from so many states. I saw a lot of you say that it's snowy where you're at. We're expecting some snow here in Tennessee pretty soon. We're hoping, fingers crossed. But wherever you're from today, I'm so thrilled that you've decided to sacrifice a small little sliver of your day to come in and hear my Southern accent present math to you. I'm just thrilled that you decided this. Be careful. If that Southern accent does get a little annoying at any point, you can always feel free to mute me on your computer, but hopefully you can hang in there with me. I'm thrilled to have all of you. I'm going to go on and share my screen, and we're going to talk about math today. Now, I want to go on and start off by saying this, two things. James and I were talking about this as we were getting set up here. Number one, the Q&A box that we have on Zoom is so fantastic if you've got a question for me. If you want to pop it in there, I will be seeing the chat box too, but that's probably the best way to separate questions from the rest of the greetings that are happening right now. So please, I welcome questions. I'll read them over while we're going through the session if you have any, or at the end if you want me to wait till then to answer it. Feel free to shoot me a question. We'll talk about it. Here's the other thing, y'all. And I know this is going to stun you. This class is not going to give you all of the answers on how to teach math effectively to your students. I know, gasp, it's a shock. You're just blown away right now. You're thinking, oh, I thought, Alex, you were going to get me to get perfect scores on the high set after this or on the GED, right? Unfortunately, no. Here's the deal. This is always a work in progress, and I think for all of you as educators, we know this internally. We're the forever romantics, right? We always think, man, if I just had this little bit extra to it, I could master math for my students and everybody would come in. It would be like a factory. We could get them in and out with their diploma and other skills if we just found the perfect way of teaching this. But the reality is it's different for different students. And I think all of us know that in the back of our head, and we learn that over time. And that helps us to more effectively present this information to them. And I think you're going to see during this presentation today why this is so important. And so many of you know this already. I'm certainly not here to lecture because you know so many of the situations I'm going to talk about because you've experienced the same thing that I have. But I think it's always good to reflect. It's always good to remember the importance of certain things that we do and we reiterate in the classroom. So I'm so grateful to have this time with you to go over all of this and discuss it. Let's talk about this, some questions. If you want to put the answers to some of these in the chat box, feel free to. I'll see them kind of popping up rapidly from different folks. When was the first time you recall using math in your personal life? If that's going to be, an essay long response, you may not want to share it in the chat box. But if it's something where you think you could get a quick sentence in, let me know. What was the first time you recall using math in your personal life? Whether it was when you were a kid, whether it was when you were a young adult, whether it was when adulthood finally hit and you realized you were going to have to do additional things and have additional responsibilities. When was the first time you recall using math in your professional life? So think about when you got your first job. What was the situation in which you had to use math in that environment? I love the responses I'm getting right now. Okay, I'm a farm kid, so when someone said counting on the farm, I know what you mean. I had to deal with that too as a kid a lot. Grocery shopping, I can relate to that. Someone said baseball. I have a friend, actually my best friend from high school is a huge baseball fan. He learned a lot of math before we even had classes because he would go with his dad to the games and he would learn how the scoring was done. Reviewing data, just so much good stuff here, y'all. Retail jobs, the Navy, doing grades for the first time. We all know that. I think that one thing is, for so many of our students, they think of math as something separate, right? It's something that's like a different facility that they have to have. And so they don't think of a lot of these concepts that you just put in the chat box in personal professional life as something that is actually mathematical. And that's where the problems begin for a lot of them in their personal and professional lives because they don't know how to manage that outside of a classroom. So we're going to talk about that. Thank you for your responses on that. So many of you, a lot of you said grocery store. I know exactly what you mean. One of my earliest experiences as a kid, my dad carried me into a grocery store and he made me go up front and calculate the sales tax. And I didn't have a calculator. He made me go through because he wanted me to understand this is an additional charge I'm going to have to pay every time I come to this store. So many of you said that. That's a great example. Here's one last thing for you to dwell on for a minute. Think of a time when your ability to utilize math correctly or incorrectly made a difference in an activity, in a personal or professional activity. So many of you now are saying teaching. I think we can all relate to that. Figuring out the time zones for family members. That's such a great one. Passing a test, banking, investing, calculating grades, reading an analog clock, budgeting for our family. Oh my gosh, these are so good. So here's the thing. As I just said, these things are not just important in the general sense, right, a personal, professional. They are life-changing. These are skills that set you apart, that set you up for success. I'll tell y'all this story yesterday that happened to me. I was getting ready for this presentation today. I've done this presentation a few times before at some conferences. And I had a student, and you tell me if this student sounds familiar to all of you. She came into my class yesterday, and she's gotten through, we're a high-set state here in Tennessee. She came into the class, she's finished her official practice test, we're getting her registered to go take the real deal, right? And she said something to me that I've heard many students say to me over the years. She said, well, once I get my diploma, they can't take that away from me. And it's a great tagline, right? We love to say that. I think I said that after I got my college degree, right? They can't take that away from me. That's something that I've earned, they can't. But you know, when you think about that, and I thought about this a few times, is anybody trying to take it away from you? Is that on the, you know, somebody breaks into my house, I think they're going to take the TV, the iPhone. I don't think that they're going to take my diploma right away, right? It's a good catchphrase. But here's the issue that I have with that and the one track mind for some of our students. You know what people can take away from you? Time, resources, money, things that are all mathematical in origin, things that are different from that sheet of paper. What I said to our group at our Tennessee's Academy last summer, which was a great time, I said to a large group that we had at a few different sessions, I said, if a student walks out of our classes with a sheet of paper saying they're a high school equivalency graduate, but they don't know how to balance a checkbook, they don't know how to do their taxes, they don't know how to do basic mathematical skills in their daily life, did we really provide them an education? I don't think we did. And so one of the biggest things, I work in rural Tennessee. For a lot of you that work in a rural area of your state, you're going to know what I'm about to say. I drive 20 to 40 minutes between my different sites to teach classes, to do pre-testing, to do our classes with soft skills. And I can tell you something that you very quickly realize is it's not just about the lack of a sheet of paper that says I'm a graduate. It's about a fundamental misunderstanding of how math will better their life if they can get a grasp of it and see how numbers can work for them instead of against them. And so that's one thing that we're going to discuss during this session. And again, thank y'all for the comments in the chat box about, you know, I think, Christine, you made a great point. I think encouragement for our students is so important because one thing that gets me so upset, y'all, in our culture, and it starts, unfortunately, at some of in our school level, it has to do with, for some reason, it got to be the hip thing in education for a number of years to tell a child, well, you've either got more of an artistic brain or a more STEM-oriented brain, as if you couldn't have both. I think a lot of students at a very early age, when they failed to do math correctly a few times, they just think, I'm not a math person. Guess what? I don't think any of us are really math people. There are probably a very select number of people on the planet that we would call math people, right? That are real nerds that stay up at night grinding the numbers. They're accountants, they're tax attorneys, they're people like that. But the reality is, I don't think any of us are just itching to do math every morning that we wake up. But it is something that we realize at a certain age, I've got to get a better grasp on. Because I'm not going to get ahead for my family. I'm not going to get ahead for myself if I don't understand this better. So when I think of things that I do with my students, I think of being humble. I think of revealing myself and my struggles. Because I got to tell y'all, I grew up in rural Tennessee. I moved away for a number of years, went to college, and then I had my first job out of state. Saw someone on the call from New York. I moved to New York for a while. Good luck with, speaking of money, good luck with it. But great place. Of course, I love it. If we could get better paying teaching jobs, I'm back there in a heartbeat, right? But, and a lot of y'all are saying, hey, it's not just New York. Everywhere is more expensive now. It's been a tough year, right? But one thing that I can relate to with my students, I think sometimes folks, when they come into our classrooms, I normally dress pretty professionally. They may come in pajamas. They may come in a shirt and shorts. And even this time of year, I have some guys that do that. they'll they'll come in, and I think there's instantly some form of intimidation by the fact that they feel like, because of the way I appear and the way that I speak, I've had an easier go of things and an easier life, and immediately there's a disconnection that's made there between me and the student, which I don't like. And so immediately what I try to do in my lessons on the math is I try to relate to them by telling them my struggles. I think that's very difficult to do, isn't it? You know, one thing that we as humans do not like to discuss with each other is money. We don't, do we? If I sat in a room right now with all of you, and I said to all of you, I said, hey, how many of you are doing financially okay? Not, Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, but you're doing okay. I'm willing to bet most of the room would raise their hand. And then, if I said next, I said, okay, prove it. Pull out your bank statement right now. Let's all compare bank statements. How much money have we got? How many charges are on the credit card? Now, all of a sudden, I don't, for one reason or another, I get a little self-conscious. Even if I'm doing okay, even if my bank account is okay, I don't know about the guy or girl next to me. I don't know how I'm going to stack up. And so money is a very difficult topic for a lot of people because it's just uncomfortable, even within our own families, right? The vast majority of divorces in the United States, number 2 on the list all the time of the reason for the divorce is financially related. So even among our spouses, we have an issue discussing this. So of course, it's hard for us to relate to our students, who most of which are just coming into our classroom for the first time, to relate to them on this level, but you have to do it. So when I'm looking at personal, professional, I often tell folks about, many of you made this point about when I was a kid, my dad made me go to the grocery store from the age where I was kind of cognizant of the fact that when you went to a store, you had to have money to buy the things in said store. He started working with me on that, the idea of sales tax, how much I could have based on the dollar amount I was given, helping those things to click in my brain. How many of you can relate to my professional life example? How many of you, one of your first jobs was a grant job that you got paid on contract? Not fun, is it? Some of you may be in that position right now. Boy, that's an eye-opener, isn't it? You get this nice check and you say, wow, this is great. I didn't think I was going to make this much money. And then at the end of the year, Uncle Sam says, oh yeah, by the way, taxes didn't come out of that, and Social Security and Medicare didn't come out of that. You're going to have to write us a big check, so you better be saving that money, because you're going to have to let us in on a little of it at the end of the year. Now, think about the 2 examples that I just gave y'all. Do you think most of our students have those? Most of the time, they don't have a parent that took the time and had the patience to walk around a grocery store with them and explain what each item was, how much it was going to cost. Most of those students, when they are confronted with something like a job on contract, they get very angry and defensive at the end of the year because they didn't realize, they had nobody to explain to them ahead of time. Well, if they did, they may have not even heard it, or they didn't go to the session to fill them in. They didn't understand the concept because they had never been taught it before. Oh yeah, you don't get to keep all this money. You're going to have to set something aside for the end of the year. So it is one of those things where, and so many of you are now chipping in here on the idea of how uncomfortable it is to talk about these subjects with our students, because they're self-conscious with it just as much as we are. But we have to do it. Here's what I do. I go through struggles that I've had in the past, and then I explain to students, here's what you can do to avoid this. You know, one of the most eye-opening things for me, and many of you are going to be shaking your heads when you say this, I had to go in for a surgery 5 years ago. I had a tumor on this side of my head that had to be removed, and thankfully the procedure went very well. And I got to be honest with y'all, I guess again, I was a little, even after all these years of learning ins and outs with money, I was very, very gullible because with us having a state job, I said, we've got some good benefits. We're going to have, I said, I'm not going to worry with much with this. And then you get to have the surgery and you start getting the bills after and you realize, oh, health insurance doesn't pay for everything. I had to end up shelling out quite a bit. And I think that one of those elements that was so humbling of that experience was, as I was going through that, I started talking with my students about it. I said, I can't believe I got another bill from the hospital today. I said, what's this one for? And I would start to relate, and let me tell y'all something. There were 2 students in my class at the time who never spoke beforehand to me. They were silent. Y'all know the type. They would come in every time, guy and girl. They'd listen, they'd write down some stuff, and they'd leave. And when I started opening up about that as they were going through it, their eyes lit up and they started chattering like you wouldn't believe. They said, oh, Mr. Alex, I know what you're going through. That we had to go last year, we got sick, and we thought it was going to be free, and we ended up shelling out a few $100s, and the girl said, I'm still paying some of it down. I formed a connection there with that student that I never would have had if I had just kept things to area of a circle. Pythagorean theorem. If I just kept things on that mathematical level, I would have never had that connection. Those 2 people ended up passing the exam. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of them because I feel like there were moments like that it really started to resonate at a higher level. And so for a lot of you, I think that that's one thing that's a block for some of our students. Math seems like a distant concept, but when we can link it to something personal, now all of a sudden the student has something, they have a buy-in. They're sitting there saying, I know what you're going through. So my last question on that is, do these stories sound familiar? And many of you in the chat box, I'm loving these responses because you're saying, yeah, I know exactly what you went through. I had surgery a few years ago. I was in the emergency room. Someone saying ambulances aren't cheap. And you imagine how difficult that is for us on teacher pay. And now you imagine what most of our students who do not have health insurance will have to face. These are things that they need to know that go well beyond the diploma that we hopefully are able to give them at the end of our program and at the end of testing. I love y'all's responses, y'all. Thank you. So, I want to say this. I know sometimes in these sessions, these bigger sessions, you wonder if the speaker's actually looking. I'm looking at these responses as I'm talking, and I just want to thank y'all so much for those because it's so illuminating, and I can guarantee you that for every person that's typing that, there are 5 to 7 other people who are looking on at the chat box who are saying, yep, I know what that person went through. So it's not just connecting you to your students, it's connecting you to your peers across the United States. So what does this mean? This means linking math to our students' daily lives as much as possible. I always like this meme about the math teacher trying to explain the problem. And the person just sitting back, just absolutely terrified. I had that, y'all, last Thursday. We were going over different values in geometry, like triangle equaling up to 180 degrees, straight line, 180. And I had one girl in the back whose eyes just bugged out. She was like, I don't know if I can remember all this. I said, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're going to remember it one piece at a time. But when we use these personal examples in class and we relate them to what we're teaching, now all of a sudden there's a different level of engagement that's produced. So not only are they going to see, okay, this is holding me back on the exam. It's not just that. It's holding you back from getting ahead in other areas. If you don't know how to do percentages, how are you ever going to know how to figure out what your car loan's going to be? How much your monthly payment will be? Your mortgage one day? Your credit card that you took out at the store that you didn't realize has an interest rate that's a lot higher than probably the salesperson filled you in on. For our students, it's not just a matter of, I got to get this percentage problem correct on number 13 on the exam to make sure I get that score that I need to get my diploma. That's a one-time deal. Like I said, that sheet of paper, it's great that we get it, but guess what? It's not like your journey with math ends at that sheet of paper. It goes on every day. And so when we relate these problems to our personal lives and to our students' lives, and we make sure that we know that they know that we care about them and what's going on, all of a sudden their relationship with math starts to change. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing when students start to run toward math and away from it. So that's something that I wanted to kind of start as we're beginning this journey together with it. But here's the other thing that I want to talk about. And many of you say in the chat box, money, math, exactly, money, especially in this environment where we have inflation affecting so many things. Now it's more important than it ever was before. But there's another level to this, y'all. I know that I can sit here and you can say, well, yeah, I get you, Alex. I understand what you're saying on that. Yeah, we got to link it. That's great. But what about trying to sell advanced algebra to our students? What about trying to sell geometry to our students? Yeah, okay, I'm going to teach them interest rates so they can figure out how to work on their credit card bill, get a better rate, pay that thing off. But how am I going to talk with them about complex equations, about graphing lines, about geometric formulas? Here's the thing, y'all. It's not just about daily bills, is it? It's about their future professionally. Look at this next slide that I have up here. I always love this. Careers that involve math daily. Architecture. Culinary arts, computer science, engineering, automotive services. So many of you are putting in the chat box, even before I put this slide up, you were saying some of these things, and you were saying, okay, this is how this relates to fractions. This is how this relates to statistics. Folks, do you know what some of the average salaries are for some of these career paths? Hint, spoiler alert, much higher than most teachers, if not all. I've got some friends in architecture and engineering that I guarantee you from the minute we got out of college have been making a lot more than me for many years, and they deserve it. They're great at their jobs. But so many of these paths are unlockable only if you have that prerequisite knowledge in algebra, in geometry, in basic trigonometry for some of these. Many of you are adding in additional career fields in the chat box. You're saying, obviously, medical. Many of our tech fields. And I think that one thing you see with engineering and automotive, it kind of just combines all of those into one area. But you see how these higher income levels are unlocked by this. And not just that, y'all, but a career for a lot of our students that they didn't think was potential before they came into our doors, that they didn't even know existed. I had a student a few years ago in McNairy County, Tennessee, very small rural county, in the right above the Mississippi line. So for those of you trying to place it in Tennessee, it's right above that line, right, going in Mississippi. And he came in. You can tell me if this sounds very, very real to many of you and common and reflecting where you're at. He came in because his girlfriend drug him to class. He did not want to come. She wanted to work on her diploma because she wanted to go to the University of Tennessee at Martin, which was right up the road from the campus. And so he comes in, and I always say after that, you know, the couple ended up splitting up, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't have told him how great he was at math. Because she got a little defensive. She was the one who was bringing him in. And after doing a math pretest with him in a few classes, I realized, whoa, this guy is really smart. He's got the knack. He worked in construction for a long period of time where he was measuring things each day. Geometry came very easy to him. He had worked on some of their books before financially, so there were elements of that came easy to him. And so we get to the end of all this, and he passes the high set with flying colors. And he approaches me one day after she's left. She's already out in the car, and he comes up to me and he whispers, he says, you know, she wants to go to school, but I kind of want to go to school too. And he said, I've been kind of looking at UT's got an engineering degree that I could do. And he said, I think I'd like to try that out. And I said, man, go for it. Now, guys, he was 38 years old at the time. He now, in his mid-40s, has a degree in engineering, has a job that's paying nearly $100,000 a year. Just 6 years ago, he was working construction for bare bone money. He didn't have health insurance. He didn't have a 401k. In fact, he told me one time when I asked him about, do you have retirement? He said, I don't think I'm going to live to retirement. They work us pretty hard. You know, that's real honesty for you. And trust me, there are a lot of our students that feel that way in some of the jobs they're in. These paths are things that our students don't know about. And so being able to introduce these to them after they've succeeded, I think is one of the best parts of our job. It's not just about seeing that click that I understand math. It's, oh, I can do this now. I'm not locked into this minimum wage job that I've been shuffling around in the last few years that I don't like, that I'm stressed out by, that I got back pain over. I have other options. That's an incredible thing to unlock for our students. So, you know, I think, and so many of you are talking about this, you're talking about resources to connect with our students. And I think that's what we constantly do, right? We push them in the direction of other career paths that they can look at, seeing that potential there. I'm going to say one other thing before I start this question too. I think that one of the biggest elements in also helping our students out is helping them to understand options that are available to them that utilize math that are available locally. For so many of our students, I don't know if any of you have had this, I've had a few young men and some women recently as well. I don't need to be gender specific on it, but mostly men that come into my classes and they're 18, 19, they dropped out of school a year or two prior, and they want to go into video games. They play video games all the time. They want to go into video game design. And they hear online that there are a bunch of people making a lot of money at that. Y'all, I will plead ignorance here because a few years ago when the first few of them came in to me, a lot of them would talk about a university. It was a private university. I won't mention the name. But it was way off. It was many hours away from Tennessee in another state. Tuition was very high. I read reviews online and the reviews were not stellar. And you know how that is, y'all. You just have something in your gut. You just sit there and say, oh man, like maybe they'll succeed with this, but I don't feel comfortable requesting my students to do that if I don't know all the details about it, especially when I know it's going to be very expensive for them right out of the gate. And so I decided after a few months of having, 2 or 3 guys coming in, what felt like every month about it, I finally started investigating. I called some campuses around the state, and sure enough, I find out that a university in the eastern part of Tennessee had a program that was basically in game design. It was phrased as something else, but game design was a part of the curriculum. And guess what? They could use their state scholarship dollars to go there. They could use Pell to go there. All of a sudden, they were unlocking financial aid opportunities that they never would have had going to a private campus out of state. So I think that that's something else I was discussing the other day with a colleague, is it's also about doing that work on the ground, our homework, for those careers to find out what's the most affordable option for our students that they can do locally so they're not bogged down with a lot of debt before they begin that career. I think that's such a great thing to do. And many of you are saying in the chat box, y'all, I am trying to catch up with these, but some great YouTube video clips. Oh gosh, anytime you can connect your students to YouTube, they love it, right? So I love that you're sharing those utilities there. So much of it is based on those resources that are accessible to them. So thank y'all for sharing that. They say they say that it's me presenting, but in reality, it's just me talking, and my other great teacher friends from across the country who are doing the real groundwork in the chat box, because y'all are doing some great resources for the rest of the group. Thank y'all for that. I want to just show you a practice question that I could do with some of my students. And I love doing this question, y'all, because, again, it helps them to relate to my financial situation. Mr. Wilk is a high school math teacher whose salary is $33,660 for this school year, which was 180 days. In Mr. Wilk's school district, substitute teachers are paid $85 per day. If Mr. Wilk takes a day off without pay and a substitute teacher is paid to teach his classes, how much less does the school district pay in salary by paying a substitute teacher instead of Mr. Wilk for that day? I love everything about this question. I love everything about it. I love it because, number one, it gets our students to think about the difference between salary and hourly pay or daily pay. Because again, a lot of our students, and many of you can profess to this, are only aware of an hourly salary. They know of some type of salary that's annual as something reserved for those hoity-toity people in the front office, right? They don't have a lot of relationship with this, right? Per diem employees, there you go. So exposing them to see the difference between annual pay and daily or hourly pay is an important thing. So they can see, oh wow, here's what I could unlock if I have the education and the ability to do something on salary, an annual salary. Now, not just that, but there's something else about this too that I like. It gets students to think about me. No, it's not over ego. I'm not sitting there just saying, oh, I hope they're thinking about Mr. Alex today. Remember what we said earlier? I'm trying to relate to my students economically. I've done this question before with a group of students. And I've had some students who have said to me, they say, I've had different reactions. I've had, wow, teachers just make $33,000 a year? And then I've had some students say, wow, they make $33,000 a year? From both ends of the spectrum. I've had students who have said to me, Mr. Alex, did you substitute teach? Can you make $85 a day doing that? I want to see what if I can substitute teach. And I said, it's actually funny. I don't know about all of you. When I was substitute teaching right out of school, just to kind of get by before I finished my degree. You know what I got? I got $50 a day. Can anybody go lower in the chat box? Anybody get lower than $50 a day? So for many of our students, again, it relates us to them on that level of income, making them see that, hey, no, it hasn't always been 35. There you go. 45 a day. So now our students, a lot of things are starting to click for them. The difference between annual, hourly, daily salary, their understanding of the fact that this is something that we as teachers go through, and an understanding of this as well. At the very end, what's this question really about? Not about us personally, but about how the school system is going to make the decision financially for who comes out best ahead. And that's important for our students to think about as well. How many of you seen the headlines over the last few weeks about these massive layoffs at so many companies? And right now, these are mainly white-collar jobs, but you know how that is. When the white-collar jobs start losing it, blue-collar's going to come pretty close behind. Our students have to realize their placement where they're working right now. And the fact that, yes, there are situations where when the economy is good, life is great, I'm going in, I'm making my hourly wage, it feels like it's going to go on forever until it isn't. So using this ability to open up these conversations, all from one question, draws our students into our instruction in so many different ways. And that's what I love about it. You can take a question like this, and I've done it before in class before, and I have 20 to 30 minutes of dialogue with my students, just talking about different topics relating to this one question. And to the point where I'm like, okay, I really got to move on because they've got a lot to learn. I can't just sit here and talk forever on this, but having those discussions helps them to relate them to me, to my profession, to their working career, to me understanding and sympathizing with the situation that they're in, and the hope for where they will eventually be. And that's so important. Some of you saying already, and I know many of you got the question correct anyways, but some of you saying already that you know people who have already been laid off in different career paths. We hope that, this economic situation we're in right now is not long term, but here's the thing, you know how it is. We always have to prepare to make sure, if it's not, we've got a game plan. And for a lot of our students, they don't, especially for some of our younger students who maybe were too young to remember the Great Recession, and they worked during the pandemic, and they were getting extra hourly pay during that. They haven't experienced a huge economic downturn in their lifetime. And while we hope that's not on the horizon, if it is, these conversations have got to happen with us, because they're not happening at home. So I always think about that when I'm with my students. Let's look at, and I'll tell y'all this real quickly. Actually, you know what? I'm going to wait on that. I'll wait on that till the end. I'll wait on that to the end. I've got a good story. I've got a good story. My students always want to hear stories. I've got a good story, but I'm going to hold it off. Let's talk about car loans. Now, I know we're running low on time, so I'm just going to I'll just present the question here so you can look at it and you can see the different things. Why do you think this is important to our students? Really important. I have a slide coming up. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. I've got a slide coming up that's a headline from a news article last year that was talking about the next big bubble in the U.S. economy. And it wasn't student loans. It wasn't mortgages like 2008. It was car loans. So many people are taking out loans that are well beyond what they can realistically pay. And they're taking them out for longer and longer periods. I don't know about all of you, but sometimes when I'll see an ad now and I'll say, what, 80 months for a car loan? What's it going to be in a few years? 180 months to pay off your new car? And these problems got elevated during COVID because we had a car shortage of new cars. Used cars were at all-time highs. And so all of a sudden our students were in a situation where car ownership was an issue already, but now it's a devastating issue. Now we group it in with other loans that have become toxic for a big portion of our society. Why is this important? It's important for a few reasons. It's important for students to see this so you can open up a dialogue with them on this topic. But here's the other thing that I do, y'all. I relate this to other areas, including soft skills. I have so many students who do not have their own form of transportation. How many of you, I know none of y'all have that, right? All of your students have perfect transportation. They're all in a new car, right? Right? We're good? Okay, yeah. Just want to make sure. No, we know the reality. Many of our students struggle to get to our classes because they don't have transportation of their own. Do you know how that's going to affect their professional future? It's one thing for me to get excited. I know we get excited just when many of our students show up. We're just thrilled that they're there. But a lot of times when I have students who struggle to get to and from classes who are not in areas of our country that have a decent public transportation system, I get nervous because I sit there and say, if you can't make it to my class, you're never going to be able to make it to a job. You're never going to be able to make it steadily to college, community college, tech school classes. And guess what? In adult ed, you know how it is. A student can no-show, and if they come back, it's like our favorite child. Come on back in. I want to help you. I want to help you. A lot of college professors not that way. So it opens up a conversation not just on the financial end of being able to afford a vehicle, but also the student understanding how important this is for their future. And I know for some of you, if you live in a metropolitan area, you may say, well, we've got buses, we've got subways, we've got ways for students getting around. But for many of us, and look, you still have to have money for that, right? It's not just free. But here's the thing. In my area, in a rural county, if you don't have a vehicle, you're not going to get ahead. And that's a conversation we need to have with our students. Again, a tough conversation, but something that can relate this to them further so they start to think about it. So you see the math involved. So for those of you that are going through. And some of you are saying, yeah, I know, I want to say two things on here. Some are saying that I teach in corrections. Well, hopefully when they get out, they're going to need a vehicle. There's very few situations in life you're not going to need a vehicle, right? Which many you're saying. But the other thing to that, and I'll go back for the person who is requesting that. I'll go back here. Another thing that I heard in the chat box that I thought was really true was that Metro cards are not cheap either. And so if you're in an area where, if you're in a New York or a Philadelphia or Chicago where you need to buy a pass on train or bus, those things aren't easy to come by either. Students have got to think about transportation as something they need to make permanent financially. And if that involves setting aside money each month to afford that Metro card, or setting aside that money each month so they can save up, even if it's just a beat up old car pickup, something that can get them from point A to point B, that's an important thing to have. Okay. I'm going to just move on. Hopefully, for the person who asked me to go back, hopefully you're able to get that down. So many of you have already posted this in the chat box. A lot of you have already talked about tools that you have, free tools, YouTube, websites from different schools around the country that are posting resources for free, different nonprofit entities that are putting those out. Folks, back in the day, I don't know if you remember this, if many of you were in high school, they used to show us a video in my economics class about how to go in and negotiate to buy your first car. Okay, now you can go to Google and you can type in a automobile calculator and it will pull you something up. So if you've got a phone with you when you go in to negotiate that price, you can double check it really quickly. There's so many resources online, but again, our students don't know about them and they don't know to use them. That's a game changer in itself. Showing students a quick way to calculate things on their phone. Showing students a resource of a video that they need to watch on this, like many of you have posted. Showing them things that they can repeat, mantras that they can look at financially that can help them to set their goals and to meet them. I think for a lot of us, one thing that saves us financially is automation, right? The ability, one of the blessings of my paycheck is it automates, it takes some money out for retirement. It sets areas. I have things set up at my bank that each month, before I touch that money, my savings account is going to grab a portion of it. And it's important to show our students and teach those things because, again, many of them are not exposed to them. I'll tell y'all this story that I had early last year. I had a young guy who was in DCS custody in Hardeman County. Great kid. Language is a little colorful. But other than that, great kid. We had a great time in our classes. And he was animated. Let's not say language. He was animated, right? And he was working a minimum wage job at Sonic while he was working on his degree. And I will never forget, it was on a Tuesday, he came into class and he had his check. And in my classroom in Bolivar, we're just about a half a mile from the bank where most of my students use if they have a bank account. And he said, I'm going to go cash this check at the bank. He said, what do I need to do? And I said, wait, what do you mean? He said, well, did I just walk in and did I just give it to him? And I said, well, yeah, but I said, and he said, okay, I'm going to go I said, whoa. I said, have you signed the back of it? He said, what? I said, have you signed the back of the check? You got to do that before you go. He said, I do? I said, yeah. I said, come over here. I said, let's just do it. He said, are you going to take my money? I said, no, I'm not that mean. I have a little bit more integrity than to take your hourly wages from Sonic that you flip burgers for. I respect you that much, right? So he very cautiously, he's coming over to me. And I just show him to sign the back of that check. Folks, I learned that when I was 6 years old. My uncle was a banker, and so we were just kind of around that. He said to me, Alex, he said, if anybody, you see this check, and he showed me how to use it. For many of you, it may have been a little bit older than that, but we learned that, right? We got to sign the back check. Here's a 17-year-old that didn't know it. So I never assume anything on my students anymore. I'm always looking at ways to bring in even the most basic things financially into my math instruction so they understand not just that they learn it when they get out, y'all, but that we care. And that's such a big deal because I'll tell y'all something. That student, he just about a month later, DCS moved him. And I felt very honored by the fact that after they moved him, a few weeks went by and he had my number and he just messaged me. He said, hey, Mr. Alex, how you doing? I miss coming to class. And that meant a lot to me because he had never had someone who actually took time to tell him some of that stuff. Isn't that, I just feel so honored to be in this profession. I know so many of you feel that way too, but there's just moments like that you really, you have such a deep meaning that stretches beyond anything that a test score or a bank statement can provide you. So We really are, so many of you have similar stories to that. And it's just, I feel so grateful, like many of you do, that we get to have this effect on lives that didn't get the same upbringing that many of us were blessed to have. Now, here's the headline I was talking about. And this, y'all, was about, nearly a year and a half ago. The bubble's gotten bigger. Every major form of debt, consumer debt, has gotten bigger. We don't want our students to be in this situation. We don't want to be in that situation, do we? Let alone our students. But we have to act as the guide. We have to make sure, because it's tough, y'all. I know every day is tough, especially when changes get handed down at a state level, at a federal level, from the testing company, from every other end. It's tough to stay focused on this stuff without everything bearing down on you. But you have to remember that for a lot of our students, these concepts are foreign to them. I'll tell this one last story. James, if you want to cut me off, you can at some point. I just have to tell this one last story real quickly. Because when I tell y'all how, again, I feel blessed to be in this profession. I remember a number of years ago, it was at a junior high in West Tennessee. There was this young kid who was really struggling. They put him in a class ahead of time. And many of you know this at a high school, junior high level. Sometimes they'll take the students that they think are a little bit smarter in subjects and they'll put them in a higher level of a class than the other students, an honors class. And so they put this kid into a pre-algebra class his 7th grade year. And all of his peers were seeming to do pretty well, but he seemed out of his league. So we get to the end of the first 6 weeks and it's not looking good. The grades are looking pretty bad. Most teachers would sit there and look at the grade and say, okay, this kid, he's a nice kid, but he's not ready for this. And so that's what this teacher did. She decided during parent-teacher conference she was going to meet with this kid's mother, and she was going to break the news to him that we need to go to the counselor and we need to carry him down to a lower level class, and maybe he can try this in a year or two once he's ready. So she meets with the mother, and she's expecting the mother to basically say to her, yeah, that sounds good, I'll go sign off on it. And the mother doesn't. She says to the teacher, my child's going to have to learn this at some point, and he's smart enough to learn it. And if you will just stick with him, he's going to get to your level. He's going to understand it. He just needs time. I will work with him. If you will work with him, we will make sure he passes this class and he understands it. That little boy was me. I struggled in my math classes every year. The first 6 weeks were a nightmare. I was behind my peers in nearly every area. I used to be very self-conscious because I would see other people doing these problems just like that, and I couldn't keep up. But I was blessed to have a mother and teachers who said, I'm not giving up on him. He's capable of doing this. He's going to stick and he's going to complete it. I'm blessed to have that background, but many of our students weren't, were they? So we have to serve as that voice. We have to be that teacher. And yes, it may be later in life for many of our students than junior high, but it doesn't matter about that. It matters that at least now there's a voice that's going to fight for them and help them to understand this material. I want to say thank y'all. I'm sorry for going a minute or two over. I really want to say thank y'all this afternoon. I know that your jobs are challenging. They're difficult, but they're so rewarding. And I feel really honored to work alongside all of you. Thank you for your responses in the chat box. Many of you are doing such great work. I walk, James, I'm walking away from the session glowing. I feel this renewed energy right now over this job. But I really do want to thank all of you. If you're going to be at CoAB conference, I'll be presenting there in Atlanta in a few weeks. I hope I'll see you there. We'll hug. We'll talk about math. We'll share whatever is on the menu. I can't wait. So thank all of you for coming. I really mean it. I'm gonna pass things over to James to close us out.
Alex, I think we're all glowing right along with you. That was one of the best webinars I've personally sat through. Just awesome material, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to listen to and to watch. So thank you. And of course, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm sure everybody feels the same way that I do. That was an excellent webinar. If you could just take a quick second to fill out my one question poll before you log off, that would be greatly appreciated. Alex, I want to thank you again. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. And hopefully we will be seeing everybody at CoAbe 2023 coming up in April. So thank you. Thank you, Alex. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank y'all. Stay warm.
All right. Bye-bye.